Welcome everybody to today's webinar about the HMIS data standard updates. This is the fourth webinar in a series of 4 webinars that you likely have already attended the other 3 for. This webinar will be covering the release status and the release for non-production environments, as well as a Q&A. Jessica will also be showing us a few other things, I'm sure. But just to let you guys know, you can put your chats, or you can put your questions in the chat function of the webinar here on Teams. And if you want to upvote other people's questions because they apply to you, that would be great. Yeah, please let us know what organization you're from, where you're joining us from. We like to see where all of our attendees are located. Anyway, let me see here. First off, if you haven't met our presenter already, Jessica Fleming is a product analyst here at Eccovia. She's worked in a lot of different capacities in the HMIS world, in many different capacities as a member of a data committee, as a data analyst herself. She will be presenting the data standard updates and how they affect your ClientTrack environments today. So without further ado, feel free to take it away, Jessica, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Bryce. I'm going to flip back here really quick just to the agenda so that everybody kind of knows what to expect. So we're going to go through the release status for this Saturday, talk through any future releases, work through some key elements that we've got, and then as always, we'll be answering any questions that you all have as we go, and then also there will be a little extra Q&A at the end. So we can jump in and get started. This is a slide that has been shown on all of our DSU webinars. This is just to demonstrate that we are almost at the end. We are almost there. We have almost made it. We have our production release coming this Saturday, September 30th. So that will be very exciting. And that is kind of where we're at currently. We have worked now from April until now. So hopefully everything is working smoothly for everybody, and we're all kind of ready for this production release. I know we can never be fully ready, but hopefully we're as ready as we can be. First, I want to talk through kind of what to expect on Saturday during the release. So first off, there has been several questions coming through CSMs, DSU office hours, about what time the release is going to start. Yesterday, we were still a little bit wishy-washy on when exactly that was going to begin, but that is now scheduled for 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time until 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The developers are expecting the release to take about 3 to 4 hours, so it should be taking probably that entire time. The second question for the deployment is there going to be any downtime required? Technically, no, there is no downtime. You don't have to be out of the system while the deployment is happening. But as always, there could be some potential for if you're working through a workflow or something as the release is hitting, maybe a step triggers differently than you were expecting it to, or maybe a step doesn't trigger because the workflow release came out directly after you finished that workflow. So just to keep in mind, there could be some wonky things that are happening, but you're not required to be out of the system during that deployment. Next up is the customer syncs. So customer syncs are going to be following the production deployment. We want to make sure that we're getting as many customer syncs completed on Saturday as possible. So we've got a team that is going to be working through Saturday and Sunday on all of our customer syncs. We've gotten about 80 or so requests for those syncs. We're going to be organizing who gets the syncs first based on the priority level that was shared in the sync request. So there was a ranking, I believe, from 1 to 10. And so anybody who marked 10 as you will absolutely need that sync as soon as production hits, or the production release hits. Those are kind of how everything is sorted, and we're working through them. So like I said, we've got about 80 syncs. I believe somewhere in the 50s or 60s is where our cutoff is likely going to be. I think it's anything that's 5 and above, we're aiming to get done on Saturday. So that's just to kind of make sure everybody's kept in the loop of what to expect for that. Because there are so many syncs happening and there is quite a large team of folks that are going to be completing the syncs, we're not going to be able to communicate out when your sync begins, but I am going to do my best to work with all of the different team members and communicate with all of you whenever your sync has been completed. So please keep an eye out for an email from me. That email will be going directly to the staff member that was listed on that form for the sync request. So if you have additional people that you need to send that to, please let your client success manager know so that we can make sure that you're also on that email. Also, client success managers will also be on that email as well so that everybody's kind of on the same page. And then, as I mentioned, any syncs that aren't able to be completed on Saturday, those are going to be aimed to be completed on Sunday on 10/1. So we are really trying to work through as much as we can, but in the event that we can't get through all of those, the backup day is going to be Sunday. And then finally, we will have support staff available on Saturday and Sunday during the release. So if you all notice anything is happening, if you think that something should be there that isn't there, you are able to submit a support ticket for that. I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail towards the end of the PowerPoint, but just want to make sure that any contact that you need to have with all of us, that you have direct lines into everybody. So we want to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible for everybody. We know that this is a very big lift for all of you and for us as well. So we just want to make sure that everything is going as smoothly as possible. So next up, I wanted to give a quick status update. So where are we actually at with all of our different items? So DSU, of course, everybody knows is quite a large undertaking. So we split this up into a few different bite-sized pieces. So we've got our form and drop-down list updates, workflow updates, our project level reports, system level reports, baseline ClientTrack reports, imports and exports, and then there's a total over on the right-hand side. All of the reports have been started, except for SPM. So just to give everybody some context for that, you'll be able to see this on the next slide in a little bit more detail, but we did just kind of want to give an update on where we're at. This status bars that are included on this slide here are specifically how much of everything is completed and ready to be released or already released. So if you see things that look lower than you were expecting, that does not mean that they have not yet begun. Most of them are just waiting to be sent through QA to make sure that everything is all looking great and as expected. So there'll be another update on the reporting just to get a little bit more in detail and granular for that on the next slide. But I did want to confirm that I believe any bug that we received before noon today is either in progress or is included in the release that's going to be going out with the production release. So there are some updates on the DSU release updates knowledge base article that we have, and you can access that by going to help.eccovia.com. And you are able to see all of those updates. I've been trying to keep those as up to date as possible. Sometimes there are quite a few things getting thrown all at the same time. So, but that has been updated as of about an hour ago. So if you are looking for anything in particular, please check that page. And then this is just to kind of give context for form, drop-down list, and workflow updates. And then you'll see all the way on the right-hand side is a total completion. So we're at about 45%. And again, this is just what's in done status, not what has gotten started already. And then here's a little bit more granular detail of the reports themselves. So we have got our data quality report is completely finished. That will be going out this weekend with the production release. Our path report, we're waiting, I believe, on 1 or 2 more items. So I believe this is going to be going out on October 5th. And the CSV export, pretty much everything is in QA and just waiting to be finally QA'd with that. Nothing new has come in for CSV export. So we're just trying to make sure that everything is looking as great as possible so that there's no issues. That likely is also going to go out on October 5th. Then we've got our COC APR and Caper. Just because of the sheer number of questions here. We have been working very diligently on this. It's just taking a little bit because there are so many questions that go along with this. So we are about halfway done with the development of this, and then we're also working through QA at the same time. Same thing is true for CE APR. We're about halfway to 3/4 of the way done with the development, but we are still working through QA and working on that last little bit of development. Also got the CSV import, which pretty much chunked up into thirds right now. There's still some work to be done. And then also LSA and SPM. As I mentioned, SPM has not yet begun. That is because SPM season is not yet upon us, and we are working to get that out as soon as possible, but we wanted to prioritize the other reports ahead of that. Are there any questions about the report updates or the status updates?
Yes, we have one question from Tino. He asks, what's the status of the SSVF export?
So the SSVF export is included with the CSV export. So they use the exact same files. So the CSV export and the SSVF export are set to come out on October 5th. And that actually is a great segue into the next slide. These are the report release dates that we've got going. We did update the CSV export and the path report. Those were originally set to come out a little bit earlier. There were a couple of hiccups that wound up coming up, and so we are trying to get those finished and released to you as soon as possible, no later than next Thursday, which is October 5th. And then everything else is still on track. So we've still got our COC APR and Caper, CE APR and CSV import. Those are all scheduled for October 16th. And then LSA and SPM are at the beginning of November, which is should be right around there. So those are kind of the report release dates as of now. Any updates that do come out, any future communication that needs to happen, we will absolutely be sharing that out. And keeping that release updates knowledge base article as up to date as possible. Are there any other questions?
Matthew asks, since the CSV got pushed back, what's the likelihood that the APR/Caper will actually be released on 10/16?
So as soon as the CSV export and path report are released, and also most of the bugs are now released, the deployment will be going on Saturday. There will be a lot more resources to be able to dedicate to finishing up the COC APR and ESG Caper. So we are still fairly confident that that is going to be released on time. And again, as soon as we know if that is at risk at all, we will be communicating that out. But we have had quite a few folks able to jump in and assist on the report updates. There are a ton of report updates this year. So we just want to make sure everything is looking as good as possible.
We have another question from Tino. Are there going to be any updates to the baseline domains for Data Explorer?
Yes, so all baseline reports are being updated kind of asynchronously. So those are all underway. There is a specific developer that's dedicated just to working on baseline reports. I don't have a timeline on when all of the reports are going to be finished, but they should be updated and released as they are completed. I'm working to get that communication out to you all. That's one thing that we haven't communicated out a ton. So I will be working to get all of that communication out to everybody and have those items updated on the DSU release updates knowledge base article as well. Are there any other questions?
Oh, we just had a last minute one come in. Here we go. Michelle asks, is the APR Caper Reviewer report going to be updated to the new data standards at the same time as the APR and Caper?
So we're working on the APR Caper export first, and then as that starts to get finished up, then we're taking on the APR Caper viewer. The viewer portion of that is likely going to be released a little bit later than the 10/16 date. So that's just something to keep in mind. We want to make sure that you're getting your export and you're able to upload to Sage before necessarily updating the viewer. So we are doing that. We are also underway with that piece, but we wanted to make sure that you all had access to the export as soon as possible. So that will be coming at a separate release.
And then Matthew asks, is there any workaround to menuing up these reports ahead of time? The work group designer is still showing an error if you try to use the form IDs you provided.
Yeah, after yesterday's DSU office hours, I did check in with our developers, and it is not going to be able to work the way that we were hoping it was. If we were using a workflow or a query of some sort, we would be able to do that menu option, but that isn't going to be able to happen. So what we're going to have to do is folks are going to have to update that information in training once those reports are released. And then we'll have to do syncs again to make sure that anybody who has the custom menu groups that we can make sure to have the sync so that all of that syncs over to your production environments. One caveat to that is that is only if you have custom menu groups and custom work groups. So if you don't have custom menu groups or work groups, you should still be able to use the baseline work groups and access the reports from there if you have access to those. So that's just something to keep in mind. There is kind of a workaround that you can use the baseline work groups in order to generate those reports.
Oh, and then Lynn asks in response to Matthew's workaround question, could we put a button in a form?
I don't know the answer to that. I can still try to talk with the developers to see if there's any workaround for that. But maybe, Lynn, if you could provide a little bit more context, maybe after the webinar, and then that way I can take that to the developers and try to talk through that, just so that I understand what exactly you're thinking through.
And Dan asks, are the HUD uploads extended?
I'm not sure what HUD uploads you're referring to.
Right, I wasn't sure either, but Dan,
yeah.
can you clarify what you mean by that in the chat? And we'll move on for now. No other questions right now.
So the next thing I wanted to cover are just some key elements. So I know many of you have already heard CE participation status and all of the HMIS participation status, implementation identifier, all of those pieces. But there has been some updates with the CE participation status that I want to talk through. We have talked through this on the DSU office hours, but I want to make sure that everybody is aware of how this is actually implemented. So the very first thing, and then I'm going to actually demo it, what it looks like for you. But the very first thing that I wanted to return back to is this mapping that we were testing out for CE participation status. So at the last vendor call and on several other vendor conversations that I've had, HUD had recommended very strongly that vendors insert a record for CE participation status for all projects within each of your systems. So when that started to be discussed, we wanted to make sure, one, that we were using the most accurate mapping that we had, and two, that we gave you all an option or an easy way to go in and edit all of that information. So this is the logic that we actually wound up using. We did any project that is project type 14, coordinated entry project. We made that as a yes to a CE access point, but we marked it as no to project receives CE referrals. And then we used the COCs that you have selected for each of your projects to populate that participating COC option. And then your CE participation status start and end date. We used 10/1/2020 unless your project started after 10/1/2020, in which case we used your project operating start date. So you should be able to see what that looks like based on a project by project level. There's one caveat to this. It's that if your project ended before 10/1/2020, we used your project operating start and end dates. So we just want to clarify that if you do see anything that's added or inserted into your database, those are the 3 different options that we had for inserting dates and CE participation status records. All of that exact same logic applies for non-coordinated entry projects, except that the project as a CE access point is selected as no. So the idea here is that during the production release, a script will be run in all of your environments. A CE participation status record will be inserted with these specific values. And then let me share my screen so that you all can see what the multi-edit form looks like so that you have easy access to actually update all of your CE participation status records. So we added in under project descriptors, the CE participation multi-edit. We also added it in under global administration, setup data management, programs, and CE participation multi-edit. So we named it that specifically so that you all would know what exactly to look for. If we navigate to this, you'll be able to see that all of our projects have a coordinated entry participation status record at this time. So here you're able to see the project name, and you'll be able to upload or update each of these records and rows individually. So here I've got no to project as a coordinated entry access point. So if I want to change that to yes, I will select what I offer in that program. The project receives CE referrals as no. And then what we did here to make editing as easy as possible is we gave your project operating start and end dates right here on the right-hand side, so that if you do need to come in and make updates to these CE participation status start and end dates, that you don't have to navigate back to each of your project screens to be able to see that information, that information is already here for you. So basically what this means is that there's also logic in here that I can't change my CE participation status start date to before the project operating start date. So if I were to try to do this, now I'm getting an error just on that specific row. And I would need to change it to be in alignment with these. So we wanted to make sure that you don't have to navigate to each project individually. Now you can. Your CE participation status is still going to display the exact same way as it would normally on your project setup screen, but we wanted to give an alternative way for you to be able to come in and do these for as many programs as you have. We know some of you have hundreds of programs, and so being able to do this is probably the easiest way for updating all of this. So really quickly, I'm just going to select yes and save. You'll notice that I only saved this specific row. I didn't receive any error messages or anything like that. So this should go row by row. And if you want to make sure that you're updating all of the rows, just select here. And all of these rows are now highlighted, and you can make updates for each of these.
We had a question come in from Matthew about this. He said, is the CE participation end date actually null, or is it displaying as null, but really saved as like December 31, 2099 or something like that?
I believe it's actually null. There was an error that we had seen come in through some bugs from the training environments that your HMIS participation status was saving as 12/31/9999. So we've updated that where we have dates just to make sure that everything is saving as null. I also then want to show, of course, looking at this specific record here, we have it as yes, and homeless prevention is offered, and also crisis housing. So let's go to our program screen and find that program and edit it. So if we come down here to CE participation status, all of this information is here. just the same as we were seeing it on the multi-edit. If you select no and save here, I'm getting an error, my participation status, but that's okay. That's exactly what we want. So that's now saved, and then I will navigate back over to the multi-edit just to demonstrate that it's now updated here. So just to make sure that everybody knows, these are editing record by record, but all on one massive form rather than you having to navigate to each project individually.
We have time for a quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Denise asks, is there also a multi-edit for HMIS participation status?
There isn't at this time. If that's something that would be valuable, we can work on getting that developed out for everybody. So yeah, if you want to see that, we do have, I know we've got the coordinated entry participation search form, and then we've also got a search form for program participations, so that you can access each of these and edit them directly, but it's not the multi-edit where you could do it all in one form. I also wanted to demonstrate the implementation information here. So this is information that won't map, so system admins will have to go in on October 1st or whenever you are able to do so after the release, and make sure all of this information is updated. So again, you should be able to come in here. This is just one per implementation. Enter whatever verticals are applicable to you all. Select your HMIS implementation type, whatever COCs you have available here. Also to note, this HMIS applicable COC, we are going to begin using, we are going to begin using this specific drop-down list and the COCs that are selected here to help sort some other drop-down lists that we would have for COCs in particular. So if you were navigating to a report and you need to filter based on a continuum of care, then this should filter now for whatever that drop-down list should show you. So you should only see the ones that you've selected here. And then also you'll have your languages as well. So these are the languages where you would need to make sure you've selected these so that information on your translation assistance needed is populating in your drop-down values. And if you want to ensure that you're only looking at your HMIS mapped languages, make sure to check this limit language list to HMIS only, and then you'll be able to select these specific options here. And I believe you're able to select up to 20. And I'm just selecting in order that I see here, but I know that many of you have different systems for being able to do that. Are there any questions?
Yes, we had a couple. Lynn asks, will users be able to complete their workflows before we can save the language list? Language is required if they select yes to translation assistance needed.
Yeah, so if there aren't any languages selected in the implementation identifier information, then the only options that users are going to see are different preferred language, client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, or data not collected. So at that point, users could theoretically choose that if the languages haven't been set up yet in the implementation information, and then navigate back to be able to update that. But if nothing is updated for language, then you're not going to see any language options in that drop-down list.
This might have already been answered, but Stephanie asks, where do we go to update the list of languages that show up on the implementation identifier information form that's on screen now? We have languages we need to add there to select for the C4 element.
Right. So if you're not seeing the languages that you need in this list, you're not seeing all of them that should be here, please submit a support ticket over to Eccovia. That way we can work through, we have a way to force override the language list into your system. The situation that likely happened is that you had some sort of customization on the list 310, the baseline list that we have for languages. And so because of that, the language list did not get deposited correctly into your environment. So If you notice that, please let us know and we can do that force override right into there for you.
And then Lucia asks, are there languages missing? How do we add to this list?
Yep. So
Yeah,
again,
I
this
think
would
you
be
addressed that. Yeah.
Yeah, this would just be if there are languages missing and you're only seeing 3, you should be seeing somewhere around 300, I believe. Please make sure to submit a support ticket
Yeah.
so that we can get that force override into your system.
Then Matthew asks, has the bug when choosing a language on the C4 assessment with the 21 in the value been fixed? The issue was that it was triggering the other language dependency rule.
I don't know that one off the top of my head, but I'll follow up with that and make sure that that's added to the release updates page directly after this webinar.
No further questions right now.
Perfect. One thing I do want to say is that we do have on the Eccovia knowledge base here, you should be able to come down and find implementation identifier here. This should be public for everybody. All of this information that I am working and talking through currently is on here. So it specifically will outline your implementation type, and then also languages here. So there is this option here, if you need just a reminder of what I had said today, that if that language list in your environment doesn't contain that information, please just submit an issue ticket over to support, and we can have that force overridden into your system. But this document does exist here for everybody if you have any questions about the implementation identifier form itself. And then there is also a form about translation assistance needed and all of the different options that are on this form as well. So how to complete the form, where to locate the form, and then also your preferred language here as well. So just for context, in case you do have any specific questions about that. And then additionally, there are also questions or also knowledge base articles about your coordinated entry event and your coordinated entry participation status. So this is the information that we have here for your coordinated entry participation status. It'll walk you through the search form and the multi-edit form that is on your project setup screen. And then it'll talk through each of the different fields on the form, what they are, any best practices for how to fill it out, and information like that. So this can all be found at help.eccovia.com by navigating to ClientTrack and then HMIS. And so most of these should be available to you all. And I also believe that there are direct links included in the release notes to these specific knowledge base articles as well. Alrighty, so those are the biggest items that I wanted to make sure that we talk through today. There are several other pieces that are going to be released that I had just recently updated on the DSU release updates. One of those that would likely be important for everybody here to hear is updating the instructions on the RIE entry assessment for sexual orientation. So we updated the instructions at the very top of the form and made sure that it outlines that that form is also used in addition to for the RIE entry assessment and RIE funded projects, that form is also used to collect R3 sexual orientation information for COC funded projects, permanent supportive housing projects, and then also the unsheltered and rural special NOFO projects as well. So that information is getting updated and that will be released with our production release on Saturday. I am going to head back over to our PowerPoint. Again, if you have any questions, you're seeing anything kind of funky happening on Saturday or Sunday, please make sure that you're submitting a support ticket over to ClientTrack so that we can work on that as soon as possible. Like I said, we do have support staff that will be working. I will also be working, a lot of our developers will also be working just to make sure that everything is looking as great as possible. So again, if you're not familiar with submitting a support issue, this is what it looked like on the right-hand side over here. Make sure to put fiscal year 24 DSU in the title and the subject. You'll fill that out, and then please make sure to select, there's a checkbox that specifically says send to ClientTrack. Please make sure that that is selected, and then select submit. So that is how we will be able to get it. We'll be prioritizing things that come in, working on any bugs that happen as soon as possible. And then I believe we have come to the end of information to be presenting, but I would love to start working through the questions if any have come in for Q&A.
Yes, we had a couple. Ben has a twofold question. First off, he said, I met with an HMIS admin earlier this week, and he said there is a known issue where the universal data assessment for an emergency shelter night-by-night program doesn't function correctly. Do you know if there's an update on the issue?
I haven't heard or seen that issue just yet, but I can certainly follow up with support directly after the webinar to see what that issue could be. If there is a specific environment that you were seeing this in, if you could let us know what that is so that I can follow up directly if there's a support ticket or something submitted, then I can certainly look at that, but I do not have an update right this second about that. But I will make sure if there is an issue that gets updated on their release updates page. Gotcha.
Thank you. Ben asks again, in some of the compliance crosswalks, you can delete a mapping. Unfortunately, for the exit destination mapping, that isn't the case. Can that be added?
I can certainly take that back to see. I would assume all of the crosswalks would work pretty similarly. So I can certainly take that as a suggestion to take back with our developers.
And then Stephanie asks, we have an open ticket as we can't get through a workflow that calls the RHY entry assessment. Is this a known issue already being worked on for Saturday?
Not that I am aware of, but I can follow up with support directly after this. The RHY entry assessment should be working as expected. I would be curious if there is maybe if it's a custom workflow or if it's a custom form itself, if that might be contributing. But yeah, I can certainly follow up with support on the support ticket for that.
Wonderful. Lucia asks, has gender been completed? Responses don't yet match data standards.
Yep, the gender updates should have been released into list item 1, drop-down list 1. So those should have come over. If for some reason you're not seeing that information in your environment, that could mean that your environment had a custom list, or that could mean that the list item number 1 had been customized. So there are on the, I believe it's the release updates knowledge base article at the very bottom of that form, and I can pull it up so that I am not just talking very vaguely here. Let me show you here. At the very bottom of this form, we can see these baseline lists here, and there is gender. And there's also a downloadable copy here. So you're able to compare your list that you have to what the list was prior to the update, just to make sure if anything was different here, then it won't be matching. And so it might not have gotten parts of that update. So that's one thing that I would take a look at. And again, this is that release updates page for the knowledge base. So if you do need to see that, then that should be in there. But gender list number 1 should have been updated back on August 31st.
So next question, Matthew asks, were you able to get the details of the fix for the project enrollment form list, specifically the override HUD-funded variable? I wanted to try to test that before Saturday.
Yeah, so what was actually fixed was the function that actually goes into and is used by that drop-down list. So the drop-down list did not receive an update, nor did the workflow. It's strictly the function. Now, because it's the function, there isn't anything that you all can do to replicate that fix. So there isn't a way to be able to test that prior to Saturday. So that is the one thing that is not the greatest, but it should be able to be released, and it has been QA'd pretty thoroughly to make sure that it is working as expected.
Benjamin asks, is it correct that when I have nothing selected in the race and ethnicity field, to add an additional detail, it won't let me move on?
Yes. So the additional detail for race and ethnicity should be, this is not me trying to be cheeky, but it should be additional, not in place of. So the additional detail would be if you selected, as an example, Asian or Asian American. If you selected that and you wanted to add additional context to say Korean or Vietnamese or any additional detail that would be helpful for that specific client's racial identity, you can add that into the additional field there, but the additional field is not set up to take the place of race and ethnicity. So you should still be able to have a race selection there.
Wonderful. Matthew had a follow-up question for his question about the override HUD-funded variable. So is the override HUD-funded unrelated to that error?
The override HUD funded is unrelated to that error. No. So it is directly, it looks like there was an update that was made, and that nothing had ever been updated with that specific drop-down list in the past few releases. And so we hadn't caught that there was an issue with the organization filtering for the HUD override variable. So an update has been made, I think, to remove a piece of logic from that function, that is then allowing the drop-down list to function as we were expecting.
Great. So we had a question from Jay Shaw. Jay Shaw asks, well, so this is an error that they're wanting to see if it needs to be, if it's going to be fixed, or if they need to adjust it on the form. They say the VHA insurance on the universal data assessment is mapped correctly on the back end, but it still shows as military insurance on the assessment. From the data standards, it appears as though the assessment should have the language Veterans Health Administration VHA appearing.
Yes. So originally the update that we had made and released to everybody was that the compliance crosswalk for fiscal year 2024 had been updated with that language, Veterans Health Administration, VHA. After hearing lots of feedback from all of you, we have updated the drop-down list to, instead of saying military insurance, it should now say Veterans Health Administration, VHA, in that option. So that will be also released on 9/30 for the production release.
Great. Errol asks, the translation assistance needed is required for HOPWA funded projects, but the baseline workflow does not include this grant code, parentheses HRP. Can you please add it?
I can certainly take that and double check against the data standards and add that if that's necessary. Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions right now. We will wait here a few seconds for anyone to put in their last minute questions. But otherwise, we will give you some time back. Let me see here. So let's just wait just a few seconds longer for people to type in their questions. This is your last call, folks. Well, for now, you can always contact your client success manager, of course, if you have other technical issues. There will also be, we'll be releasing a recording of the webinar with your Q&A questions answered. We'll also provide some helpful links in the slide deck here. You'll receive a copy of the slide deck, and I think I mentioned already the webinar will be uploaded to YouTube as well. Let me see here. Oh, and you'll also receive this via email format. So just keep a lookout for that. Make sure that your spam filters aren't filtering out any marketing communications from Eccovia. Let me see. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions right now. So everyone, thank you for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate what you do in your communities, and we're thrilled that that we have this opportunity to serve you. So thank you very much. Let's all give a round of applause in the chat to Jessica, Let's give her a thank you for being as diligent as she has been with this ginormous project. So thank you, everyone. And we will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.